Lucrative vocational skills is the topic of conversation this morning on Tea or Coffee. Now, in the first hour of the show, we had a look at some very interesting responses to the question of asking people what vocational skills have helped them over the years. Now, we have a guest in the studio who will be helping us deconstruct this conversation on vocational skills, a name and person of Garrbut, who is a training, curriculum development and innovation lead at West Africa Vocational Education, WAVE. With over 7 years of experience, he has successfully facilitated training sessions and designed immersive learning experience. Andre is dedicated to addressing the learning challenges in the Nigerian education system. Good morning, Andre. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing great.
Fine. Thanks for coming back. You know, you're
yes.
actually a friend of the house. We're always glad to have you.
Super excited to be here again. I'm always happy to do this.
We're always glad to have you. All right, let's dive straight into the conversation.
Okay.
Now, and I want to ask you what your perspective on vocational skills in relation and relevance to the labor markets in Nigeria. So essentially, I want you to kick off with answering two questions. What are vocational skills and what is its relevance in the labor markets that we find ourselves in today?
Okay, thank you for that. So vocational skills are simply hands-on skills, what you will describe as the hard skills or technical skills, you know, that allows for people to get hands-on with the things that they are doing. Maybe as we get into the conversation, we can talk about some of the vocational skills that are out there. But in regards to how it, you know, ties into the labor market, you know, over the years we have preached heavily on soft skills. And we talked about the impact of soft skills in the world of work, but over time we're beginning to realize that while soft skills is great, it might not just be the only thing that is required for people to get on a job or even thrive on a job. And looking at the current reality of our economy, right? More and more people need to, you know, start their own businesses, right? And if you think about entrepreneurship from that sense, you know, a lot of people are now thinking hairstyling, you know, and all these vocational skills that are out there. And I mean, I know a lot of organizations that are heavily focused on vocational skills, right? So it's very important right now for where we are as a people, just considering the jobs that are out there and the number of graduates that we're turning out every time. You know, it's important that we begin to emphasize the importance of vocational skills.
Yeah. All right. Now, let's talk about the perspective that we have on vocational skills in this country. You know, I'm glad that we brought up the labor markets. I'm glad you've spoken about enterprise and entrepreneurship. But there's a particular perspective. There's a particular stereotype of vocational skills. And part of that stereotype is, you know, people who get into vocational skills are of a lower class. And it's also more of a, you know, when it comes to the gender disparity, it's also more of a female thing. You know, more women are, you know, into bead making, hair plaiting, and all of that. What would your response to that be?
I think it's a perception that we really need to change because as I think about entrepreneurs in the vocational space, they are thriving and they are moving very fast. So I don't know where this bias came from. You know, everyone is very directly in some ways thinking about a white collar job, and it's highly competitive right now. You know, I heard of one story where an employer was looking for to fill in a cleaning role, and then he was specific as a requirement for the person to have BSc. Right, you know, it just tells you how competitive it is right now, and these things happen, and then vocational skills allow for people to be able to own their own businesses, right? So you learn a vocational skill as an artisan, and then you have an opportunity to offer those services. All of us cannot be the one fixing all the things that are happening in the home, right? I do not have time to be able to address all those things that I need to address from furniture making and all these things that are required in my house, right? I work 9 to 5.
Yeah.
But again, there is need for someone to be able to help me fix something in the house. Say there is a light issue, you know, I need an electrician to do that. You know, I would need people to be able to do these things. But it doesn't make anybody less of a human being. You know, there's dignity in labor, and then we have emphasized this over time. So it's a perception that we need to intentionally begin to change, to say that people should be respected for the roles that they have. You know, as I think about some of the brands that have really done well, you know, in the fashion industry, I don't know that people should still carry the perception that this is a lesser thing to be involved in.
You can join the conversation by calling 0812-182-0154. If there's something that you want to share with us, call, join the conversation, let us know. If you have a question for Andre, our guest, please call. We would love to hear from you and where you are calling from. All right, now I'm glad that, you know, before we break, you said something very important. Dignity in labor needs to be respected. You know, the fact that as a person is earning a living from a vocational skill doesn't make them lesser than anybody in society.
Sure.
Dignity in labor. Very, very strong message. So I would like us to identify some vocational skills. Now, in some of the responses to our survey, we had a look at some. Some people mentioned bead making, that they're into hairstyling. Somebody even mentioned something about any work, where they run errands, you know, for people and all of that. So please help us outline, you know, some vocational skills. And then I want us to talk about some success stories, because some people watching the show this morning, they'll probably be like, there's nothing vocational skills, you know, what's you know, can somebody really amount to when they get involved in vocational schools? So let's, you know, outline some vocational skills and discuss about some success stories. So please.
Okay. I mean, there are a couple. You mentioned some of them. You know, fashion is there. Carpentry, furniture making, tiling. You know, bead making. I think you mentioned that one as well. Electricals. You know.
Any work. What have you heard of any work? Are you familiar with any work?
Any work.
Any work. Yeah. Especially people running errands.
Yes, of course. But I don't think that it's out there as much as it should be. But I know that it's a thing now, and then people are talking about it. And then I know a couple of people who are already in that space, and they are involved. But I don't think it's a massive thing. Yeah, it's something that a lot of people know, and then they are intentionally looking forward to get into.
So let's talk about success stories. You know, individuals, you know, that have actually made a career, made a living out of vocational skills. Can you give us some examples?
I mean, I facilitated a lot of trainings where many young entrepreneurs have come in, and then we've had a blend of both vocational skills and soft skills training with them. Not so many of them are popular, but they're doing some good work, right? And if I think about some of the popular names, you know, you could talk about someone like Yomi Casual in the fashion space, Maya Tafo. You know, these are just people who've been able to do well for themselves. Just by focusing and developing their skills and building a big business out of it. There is also an organization, OSC. In fact, they are not just a fashion brand, but also a vocational school.
Interesting.
You know, where people come in, you know, learn how to become designers and learn the business side of it. Because the interesting thing that we're trying to do with vocational skills these days is don't just learn the technical skill, the hands-on bit of the skill. We also want people to learn the business side of things. So once you learn what it takes to be a great fashion designer, what it takes to do great furnitures and all of that, there is a business side of it. How do you even put yourself out there, you know, leveraging digital tools, social media, and all of that.
I'm glad you actually mentioned that, because, you know, now for somebody, you know, before the cameras came on, we're talking about the rates of unemployment in the country. You know, you're talking about how you don't particularly agree with the statistics.
Yeah.
You know, citing that it may be higher and all of that. Now, there's a high unemployment rate in the country, and a lot of young people are affected. Now, for maybe a young person watching the show this morning, you know, and they're not sure whether, you know, vocational skills is for them. How would you, you know, talk to this young person, you know, advising them to get into vocational skills? So essentially, is vocational skills for everybody? You know, from your experience dealing, you know, as a trainer and as a consultant, rather.
I wouldn't say it's for everyone,
Right.
but I think that it begins for every young person who is listening to me right now. I would say that it begins from self-discovery.
Right.
You are able to ask yourself the questions: what are the things that interest me? What are the things that I like to do? What am I called to do? If you're able to ask yourself those deep questions, it then allows for you to be able to narrow down to where you should be, you know, regardless what skills that are out there for you to learn. Usually when people come to me and talk about job opportunities, you know, and all of those, I ask them the question: have you identified what you should be doing? You know, it's from that place you now begin to narrow down to what skill do I need to acquire to be able to get to where I'm going or headed, right? And then if you narrow down to a vocational skill, then it's not different from someone who have narrowed down to any other sector, right? It's the same thing. This is just what you have identified as a passion, something that that naturally fits where you are headed, and then you give it the 100% attention, 100% commitment, like you would do with any other sector, and then the outcomes are going to be the same, right? If somebody is successful in the financial sector or in the creative industry, you can also be successful in any vocational skill that you find yourself. And I think it's the way to go, particularly now where we know that we're as a nation, we're craving more employers than people who are job seeking, right? So if there are no jobs for you, and then you have been able to identify one vocational skill that interests you, I would encourage that you go for it, give it your best, and make life out of it, and then become that solution that we are looking at as a nation to say, can we have more people becoming employers of laborers to then be able to reduce the unemployment rate?
Wow, so wonderfully put, Andre. Now, I would like us to put a spotlight. We're wrapping up the conversation very shortly. Before we go, I would like us to put a spotlight on the government. Now, you know, earlier on the show, I spotlighted two countries, Germany and Austria, who have very strong vocational skills and apprenticeship programs in their country that are actually backed by government policy. Now, placing a spotlight on the government on this country, are there initiatives that have been developed by the government, and is there still work to do? How can the government support vocational skills in the country?
As I speak on the topic of what government can do to empower people in regards to vocational skills, I'm very mindful because I do see how sometimes the government play politics with this, but I also see some effort that the government is also making. I think about the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund, and I think about all the amount of impact they are having with young people who have been able to learn skill, and learn the business side of it, and then start something with registering the business with CAC, and then they're able to access some funding opportunities with the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund. And also, I think there's the Lagos State, there's a school, the Lagos State Vocational Board, I think, last verb. I think there's a school where people can go to learn vocational skills. Is there more to be done? I think yes. If we're able to promote these vocational skills very well, I think governments are empowered to be able to do it at a larger scale, and then begin to reach a lot more places, as we emphasize vocational skills and provide more and more opportunities for young people to take advantage. I do think that there is more that the government can do, but again, I do see some things that the government is doing already to empower people in the vocational space.
How about NYC program? Does the NYC program, contribute to the development of vocational skills in the country from your perspective?
I do not see much of that. I do expect that as we carry on as a people, looking at where we are now, it's important that we begin to emphasize that, particularly with the NYC program. I'm not saying that nothing is done at all in that space, in that sphere, but again, a lot more can be done. People can begin to generate interest from that 1 year service period, to now be thinking, you know what, I'm going to do something in the vocational space. I'm going to, because I've been empowered, I've gone through the school system, I'm not just going to come out and then begin to be, job hunting everywhere, right? I'm going to, empower myself in the vocational space and then begin to think about also taking people out of the labor market, empowering them to be able to do meaningful work. Okay,
now lastly, let's talk about, I want you to just offer us your perspective, your informed perspective on the future of vocational work in this country, the developments in this sector, the supports by the government, the perspective, of our people when it comes to how vocational skills is being looked at. So what is the future of vocational skills in this country from your perspective?
I think a lot more training interventions needs to happen in this space. We need to have a lot more vocational schools, for young people and also for adults as well, right? The more we begin to spread the intervention, the more people will begin to help generate enough interest into this space. If you think about a few years ago where we were beginning to say that the future is agriculture, and then people talked about it to the point where a lot more people started to gain interest and then started to go into that space. The same needs to happen for vocational skills, where we need to spread the gospel. We need to go out there, talk about it, have training interventions that are really heavily focused on soft skills, but also vocational skills as well. So people can learn skills in the digital space, people can learn fashion, people can learn tiling, furniture, and they are excited to do so because there is a market for it, right? So if we think about the business space, as an entrepreneur, you want to first identify the market. There is a market for vocational skills. The creative industry, very, very commercial. And I think this is the mindset that people need to carry. However, sometimes you might need to help people see the bigger picture before they begin to run with it. I think there's a lot more enlightening program that we need to do and then begin to show people the interventions that are out there for them to take advantage. I mean, I know a couple that are heavily focused on vocational skills, and sometimes what I worry is people may not know the organizations to go to empower themselves and take advantage of the vocational skills and interventions that are out there.
Andrew Garrbut, thank you very much for coming on the show
having me
this morning. It's always a delight having you on Tea or Coffee.